Okay, so this is my initial review of the Kyosho Ultima RB6.6. If you go back and look at my build review for this, I built it in a laydown configuration. So before I get to how the car performs, I'm just going to go over a little bit about my setup that I ran on this. Excuse me. Because the kit comes with gold rear springs and pink front springs, that's really better for like an off-road, like a dirt track, or maybe for you're running rear motor configuration or something like that. But for AstroTurf or really high bite, you have to buy a different set of springs. So I'm running Kyosho yellow rear springs and orange front springs. So that's the hardest front spring and their second hardest rear spring. Same set of springs I use on my RZ6, by the way. The stock pistons, 2x1.6 millimeter, 40 weight front oil, 32.5 weight rear oil, no down travel limiters in either of the front or rear shocks, and I have it set to 18 millimeter ride height. The shock angles, position on the tower and the arms is per the manual, so I didn't change the shock angle at all. I added a front wing. So as far as I know, J Concepts does not make front wings specifically for the RB6. I could be wrong on that, but the hobby shop carried B6 front wings. Okay, not RB6 front wings, but you can make the B6 front wing work. It's just the holes on the B6 wing are a little bit different than what you would use on the RB6. So I think this front wing is for the B6 flat arm front wing. But in any case, since I'm using the center hole on the shock tower, if you look at the B6 wing and you take the center hole on the B6 wing and you cut a hole at the outer edge of that going out this way, that lines up pretty well with the center holes on the RB6 tower. This actually made a difference. I was able to, especially on high-speed corners, I was able to line the car up more accurately on an inside line at higher speed rather than getting really off the throttle or going wide on a high-speed turn. So I actually noticed this making a difference, at least in the stock buggy. And my mod buggy with the RZ6 didn't make as much of a difference, strangely enough. Okay, so I got that, the wing. The only other thing that I did is the rear roll center. So it's a little bit hard to see here, but I'm pretty sure that with the stock setup, if I remember correctly, the outer ball stud, you run it with a 2mm spacer under the ball stud. I wanted to drop the roll center, and since I'm already running with 0 spacers on the inner ball stud, I wanted to raise the outer ball stud by a little bit. So the long ball stud doesn't have quite enough thread left on it for you to run, say, 4mm total of spacer, and still have enough thread to really securely, screw the ball stud into the hub carrier. But Kyosho does make what they call a high mount ball stud, which is basically a ball stud with the same thread length as the long ball stud, but they add on top of that a 2mm metal spacer under the actual ball stud itself. So it gives you more margin to add more spacers under that default 2mm setting. So this is a total 4mm also. It's a high mount ball stud with a 2mm spacer. It gives me 4mm total rise of the outer ball stud on the outside there. And that's it. That's all I changed. And then I had to, of course, set the diff and the slipper correctly. That took a little bit of trial and error on the turf track. When I first went out there, I noticed that something was barking. It was either the diff or the slipper, so I had to play around a little bit. I ran the diff a little tighter, play with the slipper until it was set up just right, and it seems to work okay. Probably because I'm running a ball diff, I don't have quite as much punch as the guys that run a gear diff. So if you're running, say, an RC10 B6, which comes with a gear diff, you might have a little bit more punch coming out of corners than with this car with a ball diff. But, it didn't make any real tangible difference in terms of my lap times. The car still felt phenomenal. In terms of gearing, by the way, I'm running a 69-tooth spur and a 33-tooth pinion. And this is a Turnigy Trackstar, I think it's their Gen 2 17.5 motor with maximum timing. And I'm running their Turnigy Trackstar stock spec speed control. So it's a 60 amp speed control. I think this is new in their offering, or the products that they offer. I'm used to running their Trackstar 120 amp, which goes for about $70. It's fully adjustable. You can use the same programming box for that as you can with this 60 amp stock speed control. And this goes for under $30, which is an incredible deal. The only other speed controls I've run that were that cheap were the Hobby King speed controls, and those had very weak brakes. This one, the brakes are just as strong as they are on the 120 amp speed control. And, it's fully adjustable with the exception of boost because it's a stock speedo. And it's awesome. It's a really nice speedo. And if you consider that some of the higher end stock speed controls like the Orion and the Reedy and even the high-end Hobbywing speed controls, those go for $100 to $120. This is a really good bargain. And, I was keeping up with all the fast guys that had much more expensive equipment. So I would really highly recommend this speedo. I was very pleasantly surprised with this. Very nice speed control, especially for the money. Anyway, as far as how the car, how I feel about the car, I really like this RB6.6 with the laydown gearbox. It definitely feels more stable and more comfortable to drive than my RZ6, at least with how they are both presently set up. The RZ6 is good, but this one just feels, I guess, for me, more comfortable. I can ride tighter lines. I could push it into corners a little harder. I probably, because it's a stock buggy, I can get on the throttle much more quickly and more aggressively on a corner exit. But this felt really good. To give you a sense of how quick it was, the fastest lap with the present layout at RCHR with stock buggy, I think it was somewhere in the high 11-second range. I couldn't quite get down to that lap time. I think I was in the low 12s typically, which, considering that was my third time on AstroTurf, is fine by me. I had enough speed to qualify probably, in a club race, as you can see in my most recent race videos, I qualified pretty high in the A main, and I would have finished well were it not for one mistake. Today we just had the Grand Prix, which is their biggest race of the year, and I was expecting to qualify with a similar qualifying time, but I had two really bad qualifying runs for a variety of reasons. But the car was still, it had the same pace as I expected it to have. And if I had an error-free run, I probably would have qualified in the A main. But I didn't, and that's my fault. But I'm very happy with this. I haven't had to make any changes from the baseline setup other than what I had already mentioned to you, and it runs great. The fact that it comes with a ball diff instead of a gear diff could be offsetting to some. I would say to give it a shot. The gear diff you can install it in this transmission. I don't know how much it costs, but I know it's available. The ball diff works just fine in stock buggy. I haven't tried it with a modified motor, so I really can't speak to that. But at least in stock buggy, it's awesome. I really can't say anything bad about it. I have a lot of friends who run their RC10 B6 in stock buggy, and it's just as fast. So, if you're thinking about whether they get one or the other, really, either of them will be just fine. I have noticed that all of my friends that run the RC10B6, they do a lot of stuff to it. They'll run like a brass front bulkhead. They'll run a brass, I think the C block, the front rear inner hinge pin mount. They'll put like weights under the battery. They'll do all these things with aftermarket parts to make the car feel right. I didn't feel like I had to do any of that with this. Just very, very minor setup changes, but no aftermarket parts. And it's awesome. So, what else should I say about this? Nothing really. Oh, right. I didn't have to run a rear sway bar. I was actually pretty surprised about that. On my Laser and on my RZ6, I run a rear sway bar. And on the Laser, I also run a front sway bar. I thought I would have had to run a rear sway bar in this, but just raising the outer ball stud on its own was enough to sort of calm the rear end down. It allows you to, with a stock rear roll center setting, the car will roll a bit more, and then it can roll a little too much and kind of hook. So when you raise that roll, or when you raise the ball stud on the outside, raising the roll center, it allows the car to kind of slide a little bit, and it corners a bit more sharply. It felt more stable, at least for the surface I was on and the particular layout I was on. And I didn't feel like I needed a sway bar. So that was really good. Even though I have the sway bar kit, I just don't need to use it. Let's see, is there anything else I should mention? Electronics installation is, a little tight. I would say that this speed control isn't too big, so it's not a big deal. Mounting the switch is not a problem. The battery mounting can be a little awkward. Not so much because there's not enough space to fit everything. The foams fit fine, but the actual top brace here that holds the battery down, it's actually not quite long enough, and there's only a little bit of a lip here that actually fits under the waterfall. So if you have like a really bad landing, or if the car flips or whatever, sometimes that lip will sort of pop out, and then this sort of top brace will flop around a little bit while you're driving. So and that's for the particular mounting position I'm using for the front part of this battery holder, right? Because there's a lot of holes in this chassis. So if I mounted that holder, say one hole back, then there'd be more space on this top brace here to actually fit under the waterfall. But for the particular setting that I have, there's not a whole lot of material there. So that's a problem. Yes, the other thing I want to talk about is weight. So we were teching stock buggy today at the Grand Prix, and the scale that we were using, I think there may have been some issues with the scale, because the other racers I talked to have the same exact scale that was used, and at home, and when they weighed their car at home, they were coming in at, say, 1,505 grams, and then they measure it on this other scale, and it's the same scale, and it comes in at maybe 1,493 or 1,495, and the stock buggy weight limit is 1,499 grams. So on Saturday, yesterday, I weighed the car on that scale, and it came in at 1,501, and that was perfect, right? It's only 2 grams overweight. And then today, the very next day, I weighed the exact same car, fully loaded with the battery, the body, everything, and it came in at 1,497, I think. So I had to add, 2 screws just to add 2 grams, and I came in at 1,499. And then I ran the first qualifier, and then I weighed it again, and it came in at like 1,493. So I think there was a problem with the scale. So I tried adding more screws and ball studs just to weigh it down a little bit, and then I took all those out, and I just added a 7-gram, lead weight. It's just Velcroed in right here. You can't really see it. And that got me to 1,501 or 1,500. So check the scale you're using. Definitely this car, fully built with the electronics installed, will be very, very, very close to the legal minimum weight. And I suspect that is by design, right? If you're going to run this in stock buggy, you want to be, in some cases, as close as possible to 1,499 grams as you can get. and I don't have to get any titanium screws or aluminum whatever or any kind of bullshit. This car weighs in, very, very close to that legal limit. So in that sense, it's absolutely perfect for stock buggy. Okay, I'm going to stop rambling. I think I've said enough. In short, I really like it, and I hope to use this more often. So thanks for watching.